It's You're All Doomed, the podcast that tears through Friday the 13th Part 3 in 13-minute chunks. I'm juggling ladies man Greg.
And I'm still just Brian.
And this chunk begins with Fox lovingly caressing the saddle that she's enjoying in the barn, and ends with the battery on the VW Bug going dead. So yeah, Fox is continuing her exploration of the seemingly abandoned barn at Higgins Haven, and trips and almost face plants right into a pitchfork. At first, I was sort of disappointed that there was no 3D effect, that was a missed opportunity, but I think we'll get enough of pitchfork 3D poking action coming up. So
I got the impression that the prongs of the pitchfork was a 3D effect. You don't think so?
It may have been some level of depth to the screen, but it didn't seem like it was it was shot to be coming right at the audience.
Okay.
So yeah, I felt it was like a little bit of a missed opportunity, but they quickly followed up with a 3D effect of Fox climbing the ladder into the hayloft. So
which I thought was odd.
Yeah.
But
meanwhile, outside, Ali and Loco are still wrapping up their siphoning of the van's gas tank. Loco looks like he can barely carry that can of gas. As you know, he's lugging it over to the barn.
We learned what their plan is, which is to Loco's going to take the gas can over to the barn, and they're going to start pouring, because I guess their plan is to burn the barn down.
Yeah, I guess they're going to douse the barn in gas, and then
which I also like. Why would? They're doing this to get back at Shelly and Vera. Why would they care if the barn burns down? It's not their barn.
Well, but Ali and Fox don't, and Loco don't know that. They figured that these people are here. They must have some connection to the barn, whether they own it or not.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's just kind of a threatening thing to do. It is interesting that they talk that, no one's going to get hurt. They don't want anybody to actually be injured or, burning down a barn they seem perfectly fine with. Although I think Fox would probably object to this plan in hindsight, because she's enjoying the hell out of this barn.
She loves this barn.
Loco gets to the door and he finds that Fox is swinging on the hay rope and hooting with delight.
Yeah, she's like, woo-hoo!
First of all, that gives away their position. Anyone nearby would know that people are screwing around in the barn. But it just, again, like for a woman who was, menacing an innocent young girl at a convenience store, she's got a childlike glee at swinging on this barn rope. Loco is watching her swing, and he's getting annoyed, and he takes off his sunglasses and casually throws them at her. I'm not sure exactly what he was hoping to accomplish with that, or he probably will just steal another pair from someone. But he glances away, and then when he looks back, Fox is no longer on the rope swing.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
That was cool.
Disappears very quickly, and there's no sign of where she would have gone. She didn't jump off, from what we can tell.
Right.
She's just gone.
I kind of would have liked to see Jason grab her, or at least it's fun to imagine. It's creepy to imagine. I wouldn't want Loco to see that happen, but I wish we had that would have been kind of
like
creepy.
As she's on her backswing and re-entering the barn, and then Jason just bear hugs her or something, and keeps her in there. Yeah, but we don't see what happens. We just know she disappears, and this kind of confuses Loco, and so he decides to head into the barn. And that's when he goes upstairs into this the rafters area, I guess you want to call it.
I'm not sure why he took off his vest when he got inside. Maybe it's stuffy or something.
There's a lot of disrobing in this movie, or putting clothes back on, like with Rick putting the shirt back on before investigating the noise.
There's a lot of clothes business, dressing business going on. But yeah, so he heads up.
And he finds Fox. She's pinned to the rafters with a pitchfork.
Yeah, that's great. That was a pretty cool, gruesome
I like
effect.
that one.
There's absolutely no way that he would not have seen her body as he climbed up the ladder. They try and convince you that because he's not looking in that direction, but she's 2 feet in his peripheral, 2 feet diagonal in his peripheral vision, and even out of the corner of his eye, he would see her legs hanging there, and it would have captured his attention immediately. He would have done a double take or something. But fine, fair enough. So that means that Fox is pinned to this rafter via pitchfork through her neck. Pretty gruesome and brutal. That's kind of awesome.
Yeah, she's suspended off the ground, which I also like too. It makes you think that Jason picked her up somehow and held her there and then jabbed the pitchfork into her neck and then let go. And another thing not to be gruesome, but I kind of would have liked to have seen that happen.
Yeah, it would have been a grisly, a grisly sequence. I think that Gloria Charles, the actress, does a pretty good job of hanging there dead. I mean, that can't have been comfortable. Certainly she wasn't actually impaled through the neck, but even some sort of harness they had to rig, just hanging there limply, like she did a good job of being a dead person.
Fox she's a real enigma. She played a total badass in the convenience store scene where she's tormenting Shelly and Vera, but then she turns into this innocent, awe-inspired girl as she's walking around, this barn and swinging on a rope and having a great time. And so I'm not really quite sure what to think of her, but she's gone.
Yeah, she had a little bit of layering to her character that was interesting. Portrayed by Gloria Charles, who also appeared in European Vacation.
Yeah, I saw that. She was like a stewardess.
The stewardess, yeah. So next time I watch that, I'll keep my eyes peeled.
I was surprised to see that she had a pretty big role in Brewster's Millions.
Yeah, which we used to watch. I remember we got that a couple times.
Yeah, and it was funny because as I read that credit, I'm like, oh my God, I know exactly who she is. Because it's a pretty prominent role in that movie. And it was funny to see that was her. I never have made that connection.
No, and I don't think I've seen that movie since we were probably the same age when we were watching this. She also appeared on Falcon Crest, another one of my favorite primetime soap operas with Lorenzo Lamas, the Renegade. Sadly, Gloria Charles died in 2016 at the age of 61. So farewell to her. And then there's a whole sequence of 3D pitchfork action, starting with the handle of the pitchfork that's impaled Fox through the neck. It's poking right at the camera, and then
so once again we've got another handle of something coming toward us in a threatening fashion. But before Loco can even react to what he's seeing, he finds his gut punctured by yet another pitchfork. By Jason, and so long, Loco.
Yeah, so another 3D
punch.
Yeah, another pitchfork, 3D effect. Loco was played by an actor named Kevin O'Brien, who appeared in another Steve Miner movie called Warlock, and also on an episode of Herman's Head, which I remember being a show that followed The Simpsons early in its run on the Fox network, and so it just kind of got watched by default or by hardcore Yardley Smith fans. I do like that the tip of the cigarette that falls out of Loco's mouth as he dies is a little bit bloody. That was just a nice kind of unnecessary little touch.
I don't really know what to think about Loco. We don't really get a sense of what type of person he is. I mean, or even how he got his name Loco. We saw him bark as a dog earlier to get his friend's attention, but that could have just been so it didn't alert any people to their presence. But I just don't really get the impression that he was particularly crazy or anything like that. So he was just kind of very uninteresting and just didn't really do a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is they didn't give the actor a whole lot to work with, I guess, but he didn't necessarily bring anything unusual to it. Perhaps he was directed not to do so or something, but I do feel like there's a little bit of a missed opportunity with Loco. Maybe they just, they felt like they couldn't have two super threatening guys in that crew of bikers, and they already had Ali. So I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you, though. He's forgettable, which is too bad.
Understandably, after all this goes on, Ali is a little concerned about where Loco and Fox are, so he decides to head to the barn to figure out where they are. And as soon as he gets in the barn, Loco's body falls down from above and on top of Ali.
Yeah, into Ali's tender arms almost. He sort
almost
of catches him. But that was pretty cool. And I feel like now we're really cooking, because then Jason leaps down from the loft to take Ali on. And so
this is like the first kind of battle we've seen in this movie. So far, Jason hasn't really encountered much resistance, and now he's jumping down, sees Ali, and he's like, and what I like is Ali doesn't really freak out. He's like bring it on, motherfucker.
Shit's on, brother.
And he he grabs a machete and he and they start it's kind of comical, but they start running around and the barn, and like a chase ensues of sorts.
And there's a good 3D effect of the machete coming right at the camera at one point. But Ali goes down pretty hard with a big sock by Jason. I mean, just a haymaker of a punch.
Yeah.
And then Jason, who's still apparently wielding the meat cleaver from killing Harold. I mean, I thought that was buried in his chest, but it looks like he...
Oh, it looked like a wrench to me.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I didn't get a clear look at it either, but it looked like it might have been a wrench.
Okay, that could be. Because, I mean, he just whacks the shit out of Ali, laying on the ground unconscious. He whacks the shit out of him 3 times, and I mean, there's a good hard thunk.
Yeah.
So maybe you're right. Maybe it's more of a bludgeon than a blade. But it's a brutal takedown.
Yeah, but Ali does not put up much of a fight, despite his, his courage in wanting to take on Jason. That it doesn't last very long, and it was a little strange to see Jason punch someone, but it was a pretty effective punch because it knocked him straight down.
Yeah, it was a devastating
And Ali looked like
hit.
he could take a punch. We all know that Ali could take a punch.
Yeah. Ali was played by Nick Savage. He appeared in a pretty good horror movie called Fright Night, the original. And then I guess he also had a role in Coming to America, which I understand just announced is getting a sequel as of this recording in 2019.
He also played a pickpocket in no fewer than 12 episodes of Hill Street Blues. Apparently, it was a running gag on the show where one of the sergeants on the show repeatedly would arrest this particular pickpocket, but the character would always give a different name to the cop, and so for some reason the cop never made the connection that it was the same guy every time, so he always got a different,
Like his rap sheet never stacked up against him?
Right. And
That's
so
hilarious.
For 11 of the 12 episodes, he was just credited as Pickpocket. But in his very last episode that he appeared in, he was listed as Pickpocket James Logan. So they finally gave him an identity. But for fans of the show, this went on for almost 4 years. But for fans of the show, they all know him. Like, oh, yeah, remember the pickpocket that got arrested
awesome.
a bunch of times? So that's kind of like a cool and funny reoccurring role to have on a show.
Nice. It's sort of, there's a kind of a similar running gag on Brooklyn Nine-Nine with a car thief. So that I like that Hill Street Blues did that. That's awesome. After dispatching with Ali, Jason kind of pauses and he sees through the window to the outside of the barn where Debbie and Andy are approaching. Debbie's walking normally, but Andy is walking on his hands. So he's a little bit of an acrobat, this guy.
It's pretty impressive. I don't think I've ever known anyone that can walk on their hands, but he seems to be doing it pretty well.
Yeah, he's maintaining his balance on uneven terrain, and for a moment it looks like he's gonna maybe lead Debbie inside the barn for a shag or just to explore, but she talks him out of it. She wants to go back up to the main house, and so they abort that idea and head back to the house instead.
After all that takes place, we flash forward to later that night, and Rick and Chrissy, who had left a while ago, are sitting next to what appears to be a sewer runoff.
What a romantic place for a chat.
We don't really get a wide shot, so we don't know exactly where they are, but they're somewhere in the woods, and there's just this pipe with this water coming out of it. It's not, I wouldn't imagine it's particularly romantic because it's not a waterfall, but that's where they are. And then Rick has chosen to light the scene with the headlights of his car. So he's kind of set an interesting mood here.
Yeah, he's a real suave guy, that Rick. We don't spend a whole lot of time with them yet at the drainage ditch before we cut back to Higgins Haven, the main house where Andy and Shelly are having a juggling contest. So we have the incredible 3D effect of apples flying at us from we're positioned above them and seeing them toss the apples in the air as they juggle.
Yeah, and Shelly and Andy apparently are the only ones amused by this juggling routine. Everyone else is just bored to tears. I think even Chuck and Chili are passed out in the corner somewhere.
And they're just they're high and probably not even paying any attention whatsoever. Debbie has had enough of this and thinks that Andy could be using his hands more constructively. So she.
Yeah, what do you think she meant by that?
Yeah, well, I mean, she probably wants to do like a jigsaw puzzle or
no, that's fine.
some crafting,
something like that.
But she leads him upstairs, and I'm grateful we didn't get a 3D effect of his engorged penis pointing at the camera or something.
Yeah, and Shelly, gentleman that he is, as Vera goes over to poke the fire, he checks out her ass. So he's really putting on the charm.
Yeah, I guess Debbie's hints to Andy put Shelly in a similar frame of mind. So he even kind of starts to make a little bit of a move on Vera, but she stops him cold.
Shot down
pretty hard, but kindly, firmly, but kindly.
Yeah, she's nice about it.
And says that she's going to go outside and get some air, but when she comes back in, they'll talk. And I thought it was as gently done as she could while holding her ground. But as she leaves, like a tried and true incel, he mutters, "Bitch." So that's real nice. That he's kind of eating up his credit.
Yeah, that's kind of the first time where he's starting to become a little bit unlikable.
Yeah, that's all we get of the house for the moment, and we cut back to Chris and Rick at the sewer pipe. Yeah,
Rick mentioned something about he enjoys the quiet of the wilderness, and Chris mentions that the silence can be deceiving, and it kind of puts her on edge, and Rick is finally like, okay, how many times are you going to hint at what happened to you here 2 years ago? You got to just tell it to me straight, and tell me what's going on. Chris then tells Rick that what happened is, a couple years ago, is that she had come home late from her date with Rick. So we know that they've been together, off and on for at least a while. And Chris's parents were mad because she was running late, and her mom actually slapped her, which is something that she had never done before. And this upset Chris. And so she ran into the woods. And for whatever reason, she decided to hide out there all night, which is probably not something that I would do. It seems like kind of
there had to be a better place to go.
Even if it's just getting in your car and
go to the barn.
Exactly. It was raining that night, so she ended up finding some spot under an old tree and just fell asleep out there, which is also something that I don't think I could ever do, but that's what she did. And at some point over the course of the night, she was awoken by the sound of footsteps, and she heard a noise behind her, and standing there was, in her words, a grotesque, inhuman-looking man with a knife. And we're seeing all this unfold as kind of like a flashback, and I got to admit, it's kind of creepy because it's almost like Jason accidentally stumbles upon this girl that's sleeping in a tree, and so there's not a chase, there's no build up to the tension. It's just like she's sleeping, and all of a sudden Jason kind of comes around a corner.
He's on a midnight stroll through the woods, and he looks around a tree and sees this pretty girl laying there.
It's really it's kind of creepy, and it's just a different kind of appearance by Jason that we haven't seen before, where he just kind of appears, and it's not meant to be startling. It's just like, oh, hey, wait, what are you doing here? Mm-hmm. And then he starts to chase her. And
I did find one interesting element about this, though, is that he's wearing the outfit that he has on in the present of this movie instead of anything resembling his overalls and plaid shirt. So, I mean, obviously they shoot movies out of sequence, but nobody thought to maybe dress him differently. So that's a little bit of a continuity gaffe.
That's a good point. So he grabs her and starts to attack her, and she somehow kicks the knife out of his hands and is able to run away, but Jason ends up catching her again, and he starts to drag her through the woods, and then she claims that she blacks out and doesn't know what happened next. And when she wakes up, she's back in her own bed somehow.
I feel like her confrontation with Jason here, there's a lot of rolling around on the ground. He grabs her legs, she pulls away, he grabs her and throws her down, and then it's just there's a lot of groundwork going on here, and not a lot of terrifying chase action or anything, but so be it.
And her story fizzles out too. It starts to build a lot of tension, and then he comes at me and he attacks me and I kick the knife out of his hand, and then he drags me, and then I wake up in my bed and I don't remember anything. So it's kind of a convenient way out of, how did she get away? Well, we don't know. We don't have to explain it. So she woke up and she's fine. And evidently her parents never said anything about it either, which led me to believe that maybe her parents intervened somehow. Like maybe they startled Jason during the attack and he, for whatever reason, ran away. I don't know. But like, why wouldn't, of course they wouldn't say anything about it if they didn't know what happened. So she's kind of implying that maybe they did know something.
This flashback makes me uncomfortable for that very reason. My first thought was that they kind of tailed off, her story tails off because from a writing standpoint, they couldn't figure out how to get her out of that peril. So they just had her magically wake up, safe. That's not consistent with Jason's mode of operation, but the fact that her parents don't talk about it, the fact that she's so traumatized by it and has no memory of what happened after he grabbed her, I think they might be trying to imply that maybe Jason sexually assaulted her. If that's the case, I'm really unhappy about that.
Yeah, and there's other evidence that kind of points to that being a possibility, because I wanted to bring up, or I did bring up earlier, that Andy had said something along the lines of, what's going to the country for the weekend without sex? And then they quickly backtrack. Right. They're like, oh, no, sorry, Chris, I didn't mean it that way, which is implying that, okay, maybe there was some sort of sexual attack in the past. And what we saw, there was nothing sexual about it. It was just a violent attack where this guy was trying to, get to Chris. But then there's this like black spot, which, lines up, a lot of times sexual abuse victims will kind of black out certain parts of, attacks and then the parents don't want to talk about it. And so that means that, if there was evidence of a sexual attack and the parents knew about it and that's why they don't talk about it. So there's all these things that are starting to line up. That's certainly like starting to turn Jason into like a real creep, like not just a killer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they leave it vague because you can choose to not infer that, but it does seem like that's what they're implying, and that's not. Jason is not a sexual being at all. Now, granted, rape is not a sexual act; it's an act of violence and control, but there's a sexual element to it that I don't see Jason even having those mechanisms in his body. He's a being who exists only to survive and take vengeance that he feels he's entitled to, and the implication of this scene leads his actions into a realm that I just don't feel he needs to be, and yes, makes him less enjoyable as a slasher movie villain. We're watching a movie with kids being horribly murdered, but there's a humorous enjoyment, kind of a vicarious thrill of fear to these movies, and watching a rapist in action is a very different and very unsettling and uncomfortable direction that this movie shouldn't try to go.
Yeah, and I'm obviously not supporting his behavior, but another way to look at it is that if this took place 2 years ago, that means it also took place before the events of Friday the 13th Part 2, mm-hmm. because that, as we were told, happened yesterday or the day before.
Right.
So this is 2 years ago. So there is a possibility that Chris was the first person to see adult Jason. This is a nascent version of Jason that maybe is still trying to figure out what his angle is. Like he's maybe not a murderous killer at this point 2 years ago, and maybe he is just someone who sexually attacks people.
Well, but he's already killed Alice by that point, and he's taken his vengeance upon
That's
her.
True. Yeah, that's true. So that it is still out of... It's not part of his normal pattern of behavior,
right? And like you mentioned earlier, it's not him defending his territory in any way.
Yeah, he was just going for a walk in the woods and found Chris at the base of a tree,
or was stalking her.
Possibly.
Which I don't like this at all, frankly.
Well, let's just skip it. No,
it's important
you're
to
right,
talk
though.
About, but
I wasn't able to piece the blank spot of her memory together, and I didn't really go down that road to figure out what it could have been, but it certainly kind of seems like maybe she was sexually attacked in some way, and that's why her parents don't want to get involved in the conversation. But that's certainly not the best approach for someone's recovery. But it also doesn't sound like she may not have had the greatest relationship with her parents. And but yeah, it's weird, and it's definitely a side of Jason that I would prefer didn't exist.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea that she encountered Jason at some point in the past. But yeah, the way that this one was handled, I've never been comfortable with it, and from a pedantic standpoint, the fact that he's wearing clothes that he's wearing in the movie we're seeing right now is just, it's enough of a continuity error that it feels like it was tacked on, or like they shot that at the last second, or obviously it's been part of her character from throughout the movie because it's been brought up enough times that we know she has a past. But it didn't work for me. I was dissatisfied by it.
Yeah, well, the lights literally go out on this conversation as the battery in Rick's car dies, and they end up having to walk back. We don't know exactly where they are, how far they are from Higgins Haven, but the car's dead, and so now the two of them need to walk back, and that's where we kind of wrap up this episode. Unless you had anything else to cover.
No, we've got 4 deaths here. We've got Fox, Loco, Ali, and the VW battery. So until next time, I'm Greg.
And I'm Brian.
And you're all doomed.